interviewing Mrs. Sanford Hewitt, Chris Hewitt or Clara Hewitt, in her home in Studio City. It's Saturday, December 1st, 1990. Elizabeth McBroom interviewing. Now, Chris, the first thing I'd like to ask you, have you been interviewed for any other oral history project?
No, I haven't.
Any other interview? I'd like to ask that and see if we can get access to the other tape, but you have not. Okay. Well then, let's just start out, and maybe you could tell me how you first happened to get interested in doing all that you've done. What first drew you into this?
I wish I could remember it accurately. I suppose the very first thing I got into, oddly enough, was soliciting for the community chest. And I met some people who were also involved.
You were a young married woman
I had
who
just
come here from the Middle West.
from college.
Uh-huh.
And was naturally sort of looking around for things to do. And in that process, I think I met some of the women like Eleanor McFarland and Lillian Van Dyke, talking about the thing, and Dorothy Frost, no relation of mine, although my name is Frost.
Your maiden name is Frost, uh-huh.
And I think that at that time they were busy with this Church Welfare Association, which was not a big agency in any sense, but a group of women who were interested in, primarily in the juvenile court. And Dr. Van Waters was the referee and a most wonderful leader and woman who interested everybody that came in touch with her, in the matters of the court. And in the process of auxiliary agencies of the court was this trying to remember the exact title of it. How did I tell you? The Business Girls Club?
Business Girls Club, right.
Which was simply a residence here in town in which juvenile court girls who had jobs someplace else, but they had a place to live and some supervision at all times. And I got quite involved with that and with the work of the court. And of course, before all of that, I had sort of been listed as a student in training at the Children's Bureau of Los Angeles. And that was a time when you could learn to be a full-fledged social worker after you finished so many years of internship. That's no longer the case, I understand. But anyhow, it was a very interesting time for me. And some of these same women were involved with the work at the Children's Bureau, too. I'll turn it off. I stopped being a student in training when I became engaged and was married in 1931, but I came back to Children's Bureau as a member of the board. And have followed it with tremendous interest ever since. And at the same time, partially due to this contact, I became acquainted with Hathaway, then called Hathaway Home for Children. It had grown from an agency first called the Kitty Coop, and which they were simply, I guess, pretty much a storage place for children whose mothers were doing something else, what we would call child care today. And gradually that interest turned into a board membership, and I served on that board off and on for so long I can't count the years. And I've always been devoted to the work they're doing. It's an agency, as you probably know, that has moved from its original base in Highland Park to a large residential treatment center in the I guess it's the Angeles Forest is where it is. later on, I became very much interested in the Welfare Planning Council, at that time located in the on Figueroa, and was not at that time incorporated into the United Way. It was an independent agency supported by United Way. And I served on their children's division for several years. And it was during that time that the California study of adoptions came into the picture. The subsidiary of that was the county committee. And I became very much interested in that. And from there, let's see.
Adoption Institute.
Adoption Institute, which was a natural outgrowth of this very deep interest I had in springing from the study of the county and state agencies that were so involved in the process of trying to work out what they considered to be a safer way of adoption for children, and emphasizing in particular the use of agencies to work through rather than the independent adoption, which they felt was, which we felt at the time offered more hazards for the child involved. And see, when did Family Service come in? Somewhere along in there.
Somewhere along in there, you served on the board of Family Service of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along in there, you
yes,
served
I
on
did.
The,
Some of these things were concurrent. In fact, I think almost all of them were. And they all sort of, one gave birth to the other, which I think is a natural process in most people's experience with social agencies.
And you mentioned the Valley Mental Health
And
Association.
yes, the Valley Mental Health Association had a group that was working hard to improve services for the mentally disturbed. That I was not involved in that very long, but enough to get a little picture of that part of the program and see some of the dangers that are now threatening us because of some of these measures that we were busy with then have been completely overlooked.
Can you give me an example?
Well, simply the lack of housing and care for the mentally disturbed. It was during that time that the idea was to return them to the communities, let the communities look out for them. And that would have been a very fine idea, but there wasn't done. And never has been done, and we're all, most of us, I think, rather aware of the rather sad results.
Yeah. And then you said currently you're with the working with the San Fernando Valley Child Care Consortium.
Yes, this as the need for child care. We were really pioneers in the States. The Child Care Consortium is a group of made up of people who were involved basically in child care. I think I'm one of the few non-professionals that happened to be on that board. But it started in the early 1970s, before child care was, considered very much of a legitimate problem for us to be working hard at and to be raising money for. And also, I think our basic interest was in emphasizing the fact that child care wasn't just taking care of a child. It was really a part of the developmental processes of a child, and that if you didn't bring quality into it, you might as well not be doing it. And the Child Care Consortium was responsible for making application for funds for the resource center. And at first we just manned the office just by volunteers. And now, of course, it's a full-fledged professional group.
And you're on the board.
Mm-hmm. I've been on that board for quite a long time.
Child Care
Resource Center.
Looking back, what really interested you first in getting into this?
Well, I don't know. I suppose when you're just first out of college, and I was interested in, you feel sort of inspired to be useful doing something. And social work was the easiest to get into. It was a natural sort of a thing, I think. And I've certainly been very grateful for the opportunities it's offered me to find out about things, and as I mentioned.
You've really been in such a broad spectrum of agencies, many of them child welfare related. Can you look back and see anything that stands out as sort of a peak of achievement or something that was really very gratifying to you?
Well, I don't know if there's any peaks. It's been interesting to watch the change and the growth, and in a way the change of the philosophy, because Hathaway, for instance, was a small group in Highland Park, and as I said, it has grown into this rather large institution, a really quite tremendous budget and all, but they also have changed their philosophy from feeling that just the residential treatment isn't as far as it goes. That in order to do a job, you want to keep the child from ever going there, so that they now have their community clinic, and they just have recently started an in-home program, which I thoroughly approve of and think is dreadfully important, and one of the things that's been left out of social work in the last few years. And Children's Bureau the same way. They were one of the pioneers in getting into an in-home and out in the community, sort of. Both by being in-home and out in the community, they sound different, but they're the same sort of things, because you get into people's homes and you're where the community can see you. And what I like particularly about the Children's Bureau's approach to their first program was that it was a storefront office where they actually became part of the people as they walked up and down the sidewalks. And they just did a
Where was that
marvelous
located,
job there.
Chris? Where was that located?
In El Monte, the first one.
The first one. And
Yeah.
how long ago did that start?
How long ago?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm so poor.
But it's been within the last few years.
Oh, yes, it's been within the last decade at least.
Yeah. These agencies were, as it were, kind of dealing with the end results of neglect in the family and family neglect. And they're getting around to the other end now and starting to do something
It seems to me that they're sort
preventive.
of going around the circle, and I maybe exaggerate the closeness that agencies had to their neighborhoods in the early days when I knew about it. And I think just now they're coming back, so it's a really nice new idea. You make application for funds to get out into people's homes, which is what they were doing just automatically before. I may, not remember this too accurately, but to me it's one of the great losses during the last few years is how much at a distance you can be from the people that you're helping.
Social workers all got behind desks and
They all, you had to have an appointment, and nowadays you sit down, it seems to me, the way you do in a doctor's office, first thing when you go in, you're handed a blank to show where the money's coming from. And that was not the first thing we thought about.
And at the storefronts, they aren't doing it that way either.
No, they just, I don't know exactly what their details are, but it just
Uh-huh.
seems more of a people-to-people thing. And it's interesting to me that Hathaway and Children's Bureau both have recognized the lack of that kind of approach. And both have applied for funds and received them and done a good job in what we either call in-home program or some other thing. But it seems only logical that you can learn more about a person by sitting down in his house with him for a few minutes than you can by having him come into the office. I also do realize that it's not as safe today to go wandering around to people's houses as it used to be. And so I give that full consideration when I'm making these preaching noises about getting closer to the people.
Chris, you've had a very great deal of experience with adoption and followed it through in a number of organizational contexts. And I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about adoption and what you've seen happen in adoption and what you've seen citizens contribute and so on.
Well, I know they contributed in the days of the state and county study their tremendous interest and concern that we weren't doing the best job we could on adoptions, that there were too many people making money off of finding children. There was more of a buy and sell feeling, and that was, we felt, right out of line. And the groups that I worked with were very deeply involved in promoting the idea of agency adoptions, thinking it was much safer and had a better chance of being for the benefit of both parent and child. As I've gotten older, I'm not sure that I know the answers as well as I did then. I think adoption is a very interesting, wonderful process, but I think it's just got built-in problems, and nobody's going to escape them by one method or another.
What do you think are some of the problems in agency adoptions?
Well, I don't know that you can say that they're, problems per se, but I think perhaps it's maybe there's too much of a cutoff between the natural parent and there are dangers either way. As I said, I refuse to come out with answers. I don't feel nearly as solid as I did before. But I think I think the attorneys doing it have probably learned something in the process of this.
What do you think they've learned?
Well, that it's maybe more important than just the money. That's probably just a few of them. But I have seen some independent adoptions that seem to have been, some independent, yeah, that's right. I've had a lot of concern involved with them. Mm-hmm. And so it isn't as much just a blanket decision that one way is wrong and the other way is right.
Do you think we've learned something from these independent adoptions, maybe?
Well, we've learned that they have their pitfalls too, that they can be a little bit cold and a little, they're not all wise. They don't always, even the ones I've known, I've been surprised that they have been far from perfect.
Made by
agencies, yes.
Uh-huh.
And I think basically I still believe in the agency approach, but I just don't feel certain adoption can be guaranteed to be the best either way.
It's too delicate a process, and there's still too much we don't know.
It's just, by the very nature of it, it's just a built-in, has problems that are going to be there, and some can be handled easily and well by everyone concerned, and some won't. And whether it's agency or independent, it's not necessarily going to answer that.
Not going to be the answer.
But I think I feel more strongly now about, I'm not sure I'm right. As I mentioned before, I know it's a more dangerous game to go into areas that I used to go into. And, but I still feel that we need to get back to the in-home. I don't know whether money is the total reason or not, but we didn't always have to just come with our means of paying for a thing in order to get started. And so if a person finally gets up the courage to go and ask for some help, walks into a large building and takes an elevator to the 4th floor and doesn't know who he's going to see behind that door, you're not going to get a lot of them.
You see a lot of depersonalization.
Yes.
Looking back over some of your board service and agencies that you've been associated with, what are some obstacles that have been in the path of what these agencies are trying to accomplish?
Well, I suppose it's money. That's the reason that the thing I'm objecting to has become more and more prominent. It was always important. Any agencies you're on, their basic concern has always been to be able to meet the budget some way. And now, of course, money is has been withdrawn from so many important fields, particularly the mental health field.
Like, looking back, do you think if you'd had a a larger or an adequate budget for some of these agencies, that the course and their history would have been quite different from what it was, in fact?
Well, I certainly think it could be now. I think that we've, in the last 10 years, slipped backward a lot. And I think that one of the things is people maybe don't go into the social work field as readily as they used to, because they feel a little discouraged as to, where the money's going to come.
You mean it's not a promising career for young people?
In fact, most of the careers that really cause you to be close to people, I think have their difficulties: nursing, teaching, social work, all of them right now.
Oh, they can't compete with some of the careers where the income is much greater.
That's right. And furthermore, if you want to go into something, I like to sort of make the parallel that if you go into something because you like to be with people and like to work with them, you don't really get the big income until you get away from those people and get up into a managerial job or something that pulls you away into an office.
The further from the people, the bigger
the further
the
the people you get, the more, in a profession that calls for work with people, the further away you get, the more prestige and the more money.
Do you see any way of solving that dilemma?
I'm not positive that I do, but I think recognizing it would be something.
It would be a beginning. And you think it's largely kind of unrecognized?
And maybe it's not so to other people, but to me it is. If you're a teacher and want to be in the classroom, a principalship is where you usually wind up if you're good.
You're kind of suspect if you don't want to go up the ladder.
Well, then you don't get the money, and you usually need it yourself. And in nursing, if you want to be a bedside nurse, and I don't know that it applies so much to social work exactly, but it just the fact that I think social workers now are in offices and away from the street scene. Because we used to, children's bureau, unless I'm remembering it wrong, if somebody called up and said, I'm worried about the child next door, I hear him screaming at night or something, we'd go out to that family without checking with any policeman or with any other body as to whether we could go or not. And if we would go with no idea of threat or anything else, we didn't have any, but we went in to offer some help and to get acquainted.
And that was a strategic time for helping then? Some of those calls were a very strategic time.
Yes, they were, and you found the people
in crisis.
Were in crisis, and they were. You almost never were turned down. I mean, I provided if you went in there acting like a policeman, that's one thing, but you can't ask people for money to pay for that kind of service. They haven't asked for you. And that's, again, where this business of coming in and finding out how you're going to be paid has altered the approach we're able to take with people.
Do you think social agencies have gotten so materialistic that it...
I'm not sure that they're materialistic. They're terribly budget conscious.
Budget conscious. And they carry that over to the clients.
And I don't think they knew the other kind particularly. I guess one of the things that I wish could happen is it's very idealistic, but it isn't just the fact of agencies not being with people, it's agencies not really using each other to their best advantage. I'd like to see a city like this somehow in sections who were responsible for the people. The agencies that were there were responsible for the people in it, and the agencies all knew each other, people knew how to use each other, and I think we could be a lot stronger.
You don't see that happening?
No, I think sometimes...
You see them each operating in isolation.
Pretty much. And furthermore, the difficulty, one case in point, calling up and saying, I'm worried about this child. This happened to a friend of mine who called me. And I went to one of the agencies that I was sure would be able to jump into this without, no, we can't do it unless we're asked to come. Or unless unless the
The
police,
family must make
unless
the
the
request,
police
or the
to come.
police refers.
And
Mhm.
to me, that's the police are going to scare them, and people, an agency can go for it. For instance, the schools don't dare. Apparently, principals cannot just call up and ask an agency to go and look at something. And to me, they're losing something when we don't know each other and work together. I have one friend who was a counselor with the Y when they had a counseling service. I don't know if they still do or not. He was always being called by the juvenile police to go and check on something. And walking in, he said he can only remember one time when he wasn't able to get into a home to meet the people and to say hello. He has boys calling him up now 30 years later from heaven knows where. So they remember it so well. And I think of I don't know what's caused this business. I guess it's litigation that you're afraid of. But it just seems a pity that the principal...
an influence that you don't see people having today, or counselors.
No, and I just think it's a pity that the principals of the school can't call on some help. They have some within their own system, but not enough. And it shouldn't be their own. They should be able to, and police should be able to, the juvenile police should be able to know principals. And maybe some of this is happening, I don't know about it, but my experience has been that it's just the opposite.
That the people who need help really can't get it without going through a lot of mechanics.
And the agencies, their hands are tied. They can't do things because of some...
And there's no effective network of agencies in the community.
No. To me, if they all knew each other, I've often wondered at the building out at the United Way where so many agencies have their offices, whether they really know each other, whether they ever get together once a month to have a sack lunch or something and really talk.
Now,
because certainly joint efforts and using of each other can really double the amount of good you can be. It seems to me it's one of the ways that has nothing to do with money.
Looking back on the agencies you've served, can you think of an achievement that kind of stands out, a problem that got solved through board study or board action?
I think it's more in the rather than individuals or an individual case. If you're asking about that, I
was thinking more of change of policy that made it more effective.
Well, as I mentioned, the Hathaways' realization that they weren't really doing a very whole job. Part of their job was to keep people from ever getting there, and also at the other end of the thing, to keep those children that have to leave when they're 18 or 17, to give them some aftercare. And
did you think they made a transition for the kids who got up to that age?
They're
to
starting
independent living?
They're
Is
struggling.
this a new development?
Yeah, it's just a new development. And also another new development in connection with that particular agency is developing their own foster parents. So that it's quite a different thing to be a foster parent with the county and somebody drops by every 5 months to say what's happening. And it is to be working with a staff member of an agency who's available all the time. And you can see what benefit it might be to the child.
And this is the way it is at Hathaway, that very close.
So they're just, it's hard work building up a core of foster parents for yourself, but it's in the process. It is happening. They have a few. Now, Children's Bureau, I'm not so sure of as to how it works, but I know they do have a lot of their own. They've been in that so long. That's been their part of their program. But I'm particularly, I don't know that I'm particularly concerned, but it's one of my big concerns is that agencies do work together and take advantage of the fact that that's a cost-free possibility. And I do think it's really enhancing.
What are some of your other concerns?
I don't know. I think I probably said most of them. Things that were a part of history. I think it's kind of amusing. I was asked last month to invited to their annual meeting of the Children's Bureau, and they were celebrating the fact that they were moving into a new headquarters, and everybody was so excited. And I said, to somebody, I can remember when they were the thing that they were so excited about, they were so happy to be leaving that dreadful place that they'd been in. And I said, I can remember when that dreadful place was being celebrated, that they were moving into that from the dark little hole they had down on Broadway. So it's all a matter of where you are. And of course,
Children's Bureau is a regular chambered novelist building more stately mansions.
Yes. But one of the things that that's just come up, and I don't know too much about firsthand, but I think is another indication of moving in the right direction, and that is that the Highland Park facility, which was the original Hathaway, what with the growth of the big residential center that I mentioned, the headquarters have moved to that, and the Highland Park was for a while just went on with a few children. Then it closed entirely. Now I was terrified that they were going to sell a place, because it's just ridiculous to think that there isn't some use that could be made of that. And so, much to my delight, the board has voted, and it's by the leadership too of the agency that this idea has come. But it's to be a resource center for families, and it's to have a daycare facility, and really just to be one of those houses you can walk into with your problem. Just as has the storefront quality to it. Mm-hmm. It's in a.
You'll give some respite care there, will they?
They'll give. It'll work into all kinds of things having to do with it. It's a family center.
Family center.
Yeah, and I'm just overjoyed at that.
Chris, I remember over a long period of time you were coming over to Highland Park to work in their thrift shop. Will you tell something about that?
I was a terrible manager of a thrift shop.
You were the manager. How long did you do that?
Well, we had a good time, and I wonder what it would be like over there now. It's quite different.
You were going there for years, manager for years.
Well, I wasn't the first manager, but I guess I was for about 4 or 5 years. But I don't.
It's a long term.
I don't have that touch, but we had an interesting time. We never made very much money for Hathaway, though. But I think the community, profited by having us there.
It was a supply.
We didn't know how to put our prices up.
It was a low-cost supply for needy families in Highland Park.
That's right. It was, just mothers and all came in with their kids to shop.
You were talking about your experiences of managing the
Hathaway
thrift shop in Highland Park.
Well, we developed quite a group of people that gave regularly of their clothes and any other thing that they wanted to get rid of. And it was an interesting experience for all of us that worked there. And we made some nice friends in the neighborhood. I was, as you said, I was the manager. I wasn't really. We had a paid person who was there every day. And
you were sometimes benefiting the neighbors more than you were Hathaway.
Probably.
Well, you were doing a lot of good work there.
Well, it was an interesting thing. I had fun. And we did make a little money for them.
When we were talking earlier, you said one of the big pluses to you from all your volunteer work were some of your friends and some of your associates.
It occurred to me all of a sudden when they were going, we were having one of these retreat things and asking people what they'd gotten out of being a board member, by the time they got to me, all the obvious things to me had been said and things that really were true. And but I just suddenly realized that one of the big things it meant to me was the friends I'd made. Just people that have been really close friends later on, and it's been invaluable. It's the kind of thing you simply would not have if you...
People you would never meet otherwise.
That's right.
Do you have some idea about the particular contribution that volunteers can make that professional people can't make?
Yeah, I think they can make all kinds of contributions to different outlook and different life experience and I think one of the problems is that sometimes they're a little afraid to speak up about feeling that the social work field is something they don't know enough about and perhaps don't press their point hard enough on some things that they might.
Chris, did this early experience at the Children's Bureau give you confidence, do you think, in speaking up and expressing your opinion and so on?
Well, I think that I think it came on gradually, you know, when I'm not very good at it. Yes.
Been a gradual development over the years. Because I think you must be a very successful board member. You've been invited to so many boards.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't speak up as much as I should. But I do think maybe that one little brief 8 or 9 months or so of being in training was as eye-opening as anything in making me look at what board members say and do and what they know and don't know about what the agency's doing and what the community needs. And also, it kind of showed you how an agency worked. I've had an experience recently in looking at some of the closed cases of family agencies and so on, and even there, I think we did a more thoroughgoing job in the early days.
You do?
You know, you come home and you dictate almost immediately some of the things that you've done, and I see in this instance at least, sort of an unsatisfactory sense of what the service had meant.
Yeah, do you think you were kind of more focused and worked more purposefully and so on?
Well, I don't know, it's just more focused, but seemed we did more. We reported what our interaction was. But this is
more
only,
happened.
This is only one.
More happened.
This agency that I mentioned also has several other offices, and I imagine some of them are very close to their community and quite different from the feeling I get from the cases and from the...
Is this family service?
We're not put that down.
Let's talk a little more about adoption. You were over quite a period of time and quite intensively on an adoption study committee. Would you say a little more about why that got started and what you did?
Well, most of it was either the process or the outgrowth of this county adoption committee. It spurred quite a lot of interest in people, and as I mentioned to you earlier today, one of the things we explored, and I still think is an interesting process, is guardianship rather than adoption in some instances. There you don't run into any of the kind of problem that adoption offers, but it can offer real protection to the child and a real attachment to a person or persons, a family feeling, and I wonder if it's been carried still as far as...
Did your committee recommend more use of guardianship? But that was not followed.
But I don't know that it was ever followed through very much.
Why do you think that was?
I don't know.
It's just kind of something that
Yeah,
got
maybe it has
lost
been, but
almost.
it's just a process and a technique that I just think could stand continued examination.
Mm-hmm.
And we recommended that, and I don't really remember to whom we recommended it exactly. Although there were public figures on that committee.
Has some of the work you've done with agencies locally rippled out and affected what's gone on in the state as a whole?
I don't know, sometimes you look back at some of these things and you just wonder whether it was proved too much. But I think it did. I think it keeps things from sliding, if they get off the track, it keeps them from sliding back farther if nobody's paying any attention. Mm-hmm. And certainly volunteers play a tremendous part in that, I think.
It's
and it's also so valuable to the volunteer.
Tell me about that.
It's not only the friends, as I said, that you make, but you do have a different sense of what's happening. And this recent business in the Department of Children's Services, which sounded like such a great idea when it started, and it is a great idea, but here again, either lack of money or bad judgment in choosing leadership, I don't know what, but it doesn't seem to have proved itself. Certainly.
Have you followed that quite closely?
Well, yeah, I have to some extent. I'm trying to think what the that was part of our a committee we had out here, that the Valley Committee for the Children's Bureau, that came up before they changed it, mm-hmm. And it just seemed so wonderful when
you backed the new department.
Yes. And I think it's still, but there again, I think money does play a big part.
See, what is your understanding of why that kind of collapsed and has been so disappointing to all of us?
Well, as I say, either it's been poor judgment in the leadership, or a lack of money to have enough. You can criticize what happens to children in foster care, but when you don't have enough people to see them, but as I said, once every 5 months, and I don't think I'm exaggerating then, and perhaps they're being seen on that time by not a trained social worker, somebody out of the office. Mm-hmm. And you can't recruit more social workers if you don't have money to pay them.
Mm-hmm. So it gets to be a vicious cycle.
And I don't know really how you can correct it. But that is what the private agencies, in some instances, it's just such a pitiful little fraction of the children that need that kind of help.
They're doing good work, but not for enough children.
It's not that they're doing their own, but it's that the foster parents got somebody to work with, mm-hmm. so that you can develop a plan and a program for a child, or at least protect them. Because I can imagine if I had some of these children in my home and knew I could call a social worker and she'd be out there in the week or the next day, it's quite a different matter from trying to call the county office and get somebody to listen to you.
Mm-hmm. As you see it, has there been a kind of a rising tide in the number of children in need of care and with serious problems?
I think so. And of course, we're just beginning to look at the drug addiction babies. And our population has increased and all, but certainly the kind of violence and abuse that we see is certainly is on the rise. I think that really what I'm talking about in this early contact is the obvious, which is what people talk about, which we either don't know how to do or aren't doing, and that's prevention. We don't know how to accomplish early intervention That's when I was talking about having sections of city that work together so that people knew who to call. For instance, it could include libraries in this one part of the city and playgrounds in connection with it. All those things working together, I think, would enhance the chances for kids to.
Or do you think maybe we know more about prevention than we're putting into practice?
Oh, I think so. I think we know how, but we talk it, but we don't do it. And I don't think it has to cost that much more money, maybe, but when you close your playgrounds part of the time, when your libraries are closed part of the time, and they have a particularly beautiful outlook into the park from their children's room, and I always thought of libraries as a place that but I don't know whether it disturbs the rest of the people in the other part of the library, but this is anything but a quiet room. And they even have building blocks and things of that kind for kids come in. They come storming in after school to do their homework. I don't know how much they get done, but there are a lot of children there. And I in the YMCA's across the street now, how much interplay there is between those two agencies, I don't know. But
you see
one's public, one's private, but what difference does it make?
You see the library almost becoming a new social center.
Well, over there, you almost think, and I imagine they dread that it's going to become a child care center. But you just, we know there's some good programs, and if they could be duplicated, we need to study the things that work. Not just the single program, but the kind of ingredient that makes a thing work. Whether it's storefront or whether it's something else. But
do you keep in touch with Halfway currently?
I'm on their auxiliary.
You're on the member of the auxiliary. Are they moving in new directions now? You mentioned the in-home care, the prevention of trouble for children.
Yes, and then their community clinic that they've had quite a while now. That is partly, I think, federally supported. I guess partly federal money that goes into that. I'm not sure just how that divides. But those budgets for a place like that, like a residential treatment, is just horrendous.
What is the daily or monthly fee now at Halfway?
It's about $6,000 per child. I think it's about a $10 million budget. Mm-hmm. Now that money could go someplace else if our preventive work. I don't know. Some of the things today are pretty darn difficult to handle.
The children come with very serious problems.
It's a very different thing from when I first knew it. It's we have almost a closed. What do they call those? If it's a jail, it's a secure unit.
A secure unit.
But we don't have one that's a totally secure unit, but much more secure than we ever had, to keep children from hurting themselves as well as other people. And that's just in recent years. And there's an intensive care unit. It's quite a medical facility in many ways, which was not true before.
But you're getting some extremely destructive children.
And the drug problem features in there too. And the sex abuse, that kind of thing, is just really heartbreaking kind of stuff. And it's very hard to know at that stage whether you're going to accomplish everything you want to or not.
Your families that you work with, do they come to you directly, or?
Well, this is part of the money picture again, because 99% of them, I bet, are county. They come with the county money.
referred by the county
referred
as
by the
disturbed
county.
families, so they would
They
be.
really are county
They
cases.
mostly come from Children's Services or AFDC cases.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But that's apt to be the case, and nothing really wrong with it because those children certainly need it.
But it's already kind of late for prevention.
It is,
for many
and
of them.
What startled me so in the beginning was that they're already county cases, but the county needs to have some other place to use them. So we're kind of a public-private thing, even when we're a private agency.
A private agency with the fee paid by the county.
But some of these things, like the community clinic and the in-home, that's different. The money comes from a different place. It's state and county.
Yeah, you have very strenuous fundraising efforts, and do those funds pay just a small part of the agency
Trying
budget?
desperately at Catholic, and I guess at other places too, to increase the amount of private support, because for lots of reasons. But one of them is that you never quite know whether the public support is going to be there day after tomorrow or not. But I would say that the private support at Hathaway now is not up to 10%.
Is that turned around a lot from when you
Totally.
when you first were
And it was
associated?
all United Way
It was
support.
all United Way
I
support.
mean, that's how I remember it. Now,
And now it's 10% private and
Uh-huh.
90% county.
Yeah, and of course that isn't true of every agency in town, but the two that I know about. Now, I don't know with Children's Bureau. I think it's developing quite a strong, private support. They got a lot of people with a lot of money that will help, but it's even trying to build up an endowment, which really you ought to have. If you're getting into that, but it's a slow process.
What do you think is the advantage of having an endowment?
Well, when some of these emergencies occur, you've got something to fall back on.
You mean like public cutbacks?
Yes, and then you do increase gradually your private support from the interest on your endowment, however it's set up.
Do you think that the agencies have had good direction at the top when it comes to financing?
Well, I don't know about very many of them, to tell you the truth, but the ones I've been acquainted with have been excellent, I think.
Excellent.
Anything that I've known about where it hasn't been very good, hasn't lasted very long, it's been changed.
I mean, in that management, you haven't seen it get entrenched
No.
and persist.
But I'm talking about a very, very small fraction of what I know about, just a few.
Yeah, well, you haven't seen very much ineptness getting changed, or that needed to be changed.
No, I really
Yeah.
haven't. It's been, in other words, it's been a pleasure to serve on the boards because you felt that the place was in good hands.
You worked with, for a long time, with Hathaway when Chester law.
All the time. I was on the
Yeah.
search committee.
What do you see as his contribution?
I think he did a lot which is outside the actual work of the staff, but on support. This is public support. I mean, letting the county know what was happening. Also, his administrative staff, which I think has been excellent, had a kind of fondness for him that couldn't help but be a strength for the agency as a whole. And I just was very fond of him anyhow as a person.
But he had high staff morale.
Yes, he did. I think that there are ways in which he wasn't as strong. I think Brian Cahill is bringing a lot of different things into the picture. I think he's a fine leader.
Innovator.
He's an innovator and a very potent speaker, which Chet was not. Made his board a little restless because he couldn't always decide on what it was that he really wanted or needed. But it was the turnover has been relatively smooth, I think. And that's another nice point that I keep bringing up these two agencies, but after all, I know them the best. Judy Lau, now Judy Nelson, who's the head of Children's Bureau, she and Brian Cale have known each other for ages and all kinds of things. And they tend to work together, which brings out my main point again, that I do think that it enhances it really increases the power of the group.
Well, do you think that their collaboration can be kind of a model for wider collaboration?
Well, when it's collaboration, I don't know how far it goes, but I think that Children's Bureau's, their early in-home program that they've got, what do they call theirs? Anyway, it's the same general idea, but I think it's had an influence on Hathaway's developing theirs and their own foster care. I think I may be wrong. I think good ideas do tend to perk people tend to know each other.
Chris, is there some accounting for outcomes or results from this?
I wish there could be more. It always seems, when you bring the question up, always seems to be some reason why it's always not only difficult to do, but they feel that what it will show will not necessarily show the whole story. In other words, there are a lot of things that aren't success in the way the listener wants to hear it. But it's often when a child is in a place when he leaves for one reason or another, it may not look like a success, but on the other hand, when you talk to him 5 years later, he can say what he got there was all important. Well, there's no way to measure it at the time.
Are these agencies doing any long time follow-up on the kids?
I don't know that they are. I think they always sort of trying to, but I'm not sure.
It's not a very.
I know that Hathaway kind of talked about it, but
it's not a very high priority apparently.
No. And I think it would help if it could be on the money raising, private money raising, and public money raising, for that matter.
It would convince people of their worth of their enterprise.
Yes. Because people do ask, whatever happens to these kids? Did they ever, has it ever really benefited them?
And they can't answer it.
Well, they can't answer it for sure.
Just kind of anecdotally, or kids that happen
like the case that they'll put in the Christmas letter or something of that kind. But at least, even in reading about those, it offers a moment's quiet in a life that is full of pressures that we wouldn't think any child would be, subjected to. And you can't help it, because it is the atmosphere there is, even though they have 127 kids, I noticed in the last.
That happily.
It has a feeling of all sort of homeliness about it.
Something kind of solid for kids that have been tossed around a lot. Something kind of solid for kids that have had a lot of upheaval in their lives.
It's really, kind of an affectionate atmosphere to be in. It's not
kind of a haven.
I think so, and it can't. Even though you couldn't point to it and just say he turned from this to that.
There's been a lot of activity here in California. Do you think any of these things that you have been associated with have had a wider impact on the nation, insofar as you know?
I honestly don't know. It seems to be once in a while, but there's something about some other area at some distance, being in touch and that kind of thing. But I couldn't say that I heard anything that was specific.
You don't think anything that was done in adoption here had?
I don't know whether it did or not. I keep hoping that we've had an effect in in the child care field, working with legislators, my fear is that as they begin to recognize, and everybody does, that it's something that's with us and is important, and that the money starts coming through, that the quality won't keep pace, and you'll just have more spots, but you won't have more understanding of the importance of what's happening to these children while they're there.
You've come into child care rather more recently.
Yeah, it's been since early 70.
And you were in kind of on the ground floor.
It was, as far as the
And
alley
you
goes.
said something quite interesting. I wish you'd develop a little more about how it's more than shelter. It's the development of the child. From
Yes,
early,
I've been, very much impressed and learned a lot about what that means, because a child's going to be in some kind of care. A lot of them are, whether we like it or not, and they are the years in which they're forming an awful lot of ideas, and people that know about early childhood development and all, and some people, legislators you talk to, think it's just kind of a fancy bunch of talk, and it isn't. And
or like these mothers could stay home and take care of their own children if they wanted to.
It's kind of hard to convince them that it's worth any extra in the way of funds. And it'd be so dangerous if these thousands of children just don't get this.
Yeah.
Just because people won't believe that it's important. And it isn't fancy stuff. It's just an understanding of
well, it's going to make more of a gap
process
with these children and children who do have advantages, because they're more and more going into early schools that really develop them intellectually.
Well, just the way the better turn it off till I think of the name. Just like the Head Start program has obviously worked. It's been recognized as working, which surprised me almost.
There's been some research that established
so that they have
follow-up.
Been able to continue their money and increase it, which is amazing in this day and age when everything else is turned down. But I've gone out and talked to some of our representatives, and which was part of what the consortium is doing, is to work on legislation. And it's surprising how unyielding they are on this business of children don't need more than so much. They just somebody to watch them and take care of them, be sure they're safe. And of course that is a vital part of it. But there's an awful lot else there.
Can you maybe tell a little more about your interaction with these representatives? These are assemblymen, are they?
Yeah, assemblymen and state senators. And then we have the consortium does what we call a legislative coffee every year. And we invite all of our local assemblymen, senators, and council people, and anybody else, League of Women Voters, any representatives that'll come, and then we sit around in a circle, have a little breakfast, a little coffee and stuff, and one of our most effective parts of our program has been the mothers that come, that have been in one of this. Say one of the Valley College has a wonderful daycare center, and there are a lot of others, and they bring, each one, maybe we get as many as 3, but their stories are very, very important, and then the legislators give
Do they tell some things about the developmental side of it?
Well, I don't know that they it's certainly what you get from them is something lots more than just some place to drop their kid off. It's the support they've had, say, even from the staff that runs the day school. Those things are important too. It relieves a little of the stress that the child is going to feel when he's home. And there again, it's a kind of a human connection. That a school of that kind is really aware of the importance of offering it to people. And then they have other, different discussions of the pending legislation and things of that kind. It's been an interesting affair. And they put on a conference every year, and lots of workshops.
And what's been the impact on the assemblymen and senators?
Of course, I don't know whether it's our impact or whether it's just the impact of the realities. But we've managed to change a few people. There's some that are hopeless.
You mentioned face-to-face contacts. You find them kind of intractable or unsympathetic.
Well, you found them full of a lot of questions, like, they don't need to be this fancy. It isn't fanciness you're talking about at all. It's just knowing, just quality of the people that know what they're doing with children that are at certain stages of development. And I've been out to see Kathy Wright and La Follette and some of the other, and we have some that are, totally for us in the beginning. In fact, we live in a pretty good neighborhood right here through this part of the valley, as far as legislators go.
Oh, you have able people.
Howard Berman, the whole, all the way up, Waxman, that probably is a good little political clique, but anyhow, I think it's on the right side.
And they are sympathetic to daycare and advocates for it.
They seem to understand what it's about and why it should be something more than just I think this, when I talked about the kiddie coop, you can almost tell that it was probably the kind of place you just dropped your kid off just to know he was
this early Hathaway
physically safe. That early Hathaway thing, that was
keep him
years
safe.
ago.
And it's no longer running, but did it develop into something more than that before it?
Well, the kiddie coop just gradually merged into Hathaway.
Into
it just changed names. It was just.
And does Hathaway have a child care?
No, but they will have now.
They will have.
Thing.
Mm-hmm. It will in Highland Park. The family
Highland Park,
center.
it'll be that. It's that lovely old house over there. That's just perfect for it. And there's enough ground around to.
Can have playground
and play and a small swimming, not a small swimming pool, a nice swimming pool, not a very deep one, but a good swimming pool.
Well, Chris, tell me what turned that around. You said you were afraid they'd sell it, and then.
Well, I think they all realized that it was you weren't going to get enough for the real estate to make that the kind of difference that they wanted to realize from a change that they make. And I haven't been on the board to hear the discussions, but looking at it now, it just seems like the obvious solution.
Somebody did something right.
You see, some of our buildings were so old. In fact, the buildings we had over there, the children were living in, some of them were temporary First World War barracks. Case you quite a while back. And so we really were up against a tremendous rebuilding job, and that didn't seem to be feasible. And I just think this will be just the greatest.
Mm-hmm. Have the barracks come down?
They'll all probably be taken down, or else just used for some kind of day stuff.
Function, yeah. But the house is gracious and inviting, and will serve a good purpose.
It'll give I'm just looking forward to what happens. I just, care about it around the edges, but
Chris, a lot of young people in your children's generation and all. Do you see any of them moving into doing the kinds of things you've done?
A lot of them don't, because they've all got jobs.
What do you think this will mean if they
I'm interested that the Hathaway, the Valley League out here that I, go to, that there's so many mothers there that they're not, most of them don't have young children. I look at them and they look like children themselves to me, but they have grandchildren. But I just don't think it's very easy.
It's not easy. But are there still some coming along who will be volunteers, and some, even though they're working, and will be doing anything to accommodate them?
I just, now, with my daughter here, she's terribly interested in the Beyond War, that kind of thing, rather than of course, she was a school nurse for 12 years in various places, and she knows the things I'm talking about better than I do. And just wear them out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The hopelessness of pursuing some of these things, trying
mm-hmm.
the telephone
And she
calls,
really got burned out.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But you could see what a person could accomplish in that kind of a job. It isn't volunteer, but it's that close to people kind of a job.
Mm-hmm.
And in high school particularly, the children that just, were so glad to find somebody to talk to. It's really a school nurse is a counseling job.
Mm-hmm. The school nurses, are they just continuing to chew them up and burn them out? And
I suppose so.
Mm-hmm.
Most of
they aren't getting any more adequately staffed, or
well, it's just when you call for help in some of these, they try, but they just they don't have the staff. They don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they do some, but it's just terribly discouraging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of prevention can start.
In schools.
Uh-huh.
Have you encountered any school social workers?
Back in the old days, they were great.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what their social work setup is now. Do you?
Most schools don't have social workers.
Well, I thought there was maybe, if they weren't in the school, they were, they had an office of some sort. What did they used to call them?
Visiting teachers, I think. That was a very early name.
Well, when I think of our school up here, our grammar school, it used to have a full-time art teacher, a full-time music teacher. They're every day.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that was a public school, but it was in an area that I thought a school nurse was a useless object. But I'm sure she had lots to do with it too. I never happened to have much contact until
Mm-hmm.
Sandra got into it, and I
Mm-hmm.
realized what a difference it made.
So you don't really see a new generation of volunteers coming on in these agencies?
I think that, I don't know they'll be able to be. I think they're interested in world problems in a different way
Mm-hmm.
than just, the volunteer. If they can bring some intelligence to bear on the problems we face, maybe that'll be as good as anything.
Maybe it'll trickle all the way down to these
Uh-huh.
agencies. Yeah. Maybe that's a good time to leave it, Chris.
There it is.
All right. And I certainly want to thank you, and I certainly think you've had a
I've
very interesting career as a
It's been a pretty garbled report, but
volunteer.
it's hard to remember things in order.
Well, the order doesn't make all that much difference. We just didn't want to leave anything out.
No, I just, I think, one of my major feelings along with, getting closer to people is just wishing there was a little of what I felt when I was, that little while that I was really working at the thing. But was sort of the freedom to get in and do something. And I don't know what stops that. They're probably doing a lot of other things that I don't know about that are very important.
You mean in your apprenticeship at Children's Bureau,
Yeah,
you had a sense of achievement,
it was a very vivid experience.
And remains vivid after
Uh-huh.
these years. Yeah. Maybe some young social workers today are having a vivid experience and a good one.
Well, I think some of them are. Do you think they have sort of a different notion about social work? Do they think of it in terms of offices and appointments?
A lot of them do, but I think a lot of our students in family and child welfare at the university are really learning how to get in early into very needy and troubled families and knowing how to make a difference with them. Sure that they are.
Well, it could be so many places, but you feel so sad and been tickled with the enthusiasm for this children's room over there. But I know it means a lot to those kids.
Yeah. Well, and you don't know what's going to develop out of the libraries. They may become a new social centers in the community.
Well, they could if you didn't upset the readers and have it so noisy.
They turn into a circus, huh?
Yeah, you have to build more space and all for that, but and they don't all have to be the same every place. That isn't the idea.
They can develop what fits the community. Sure, they can.
And the main thing is they know each other. That the people that work in them use each other. I think.
Well, some reason to hope for some of these things, I think.
Well, I think that we get some leaders in the private sector is not going to take care of all of it.
Mm-hmm. And you see some leadership coming along in our Assembly and Senate.
Well, if you just would like to see some political leadership that wasn't afraid to express itself, and so what if they go
courageous leadership.
If they're not reelected, but say what you stand for. I don't see how Bush can fail to realize that the quality of the life in his country is certainly a first line of defense, if he's interested in defense.
Well, maybe he'll hear your message.
Maybe he will.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
I do too.
Okay. Thank you very much.